Welcome to Ohio Roots, the official podcast of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey through Ohio's rich genealogy, history, and abundant resources. Hosted by me, OGS Executive Director Noel Poirier, this podcast brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests, from OGS members, chapter leaders, and staff to renowned genealogists, historians, and influential figures within the genealogical community. Each episode delves into fascinating topics and captivating stories. So grab your headphones, hit that play button, and join us on this enthralling journey of Ohio's roots. On this episode of the OGS Ohio Roots podcast, we're heading into the stacks and stories of one of the Midwest's most important history collections. Our guest is Stephen Headley, reference librarian with the Genealogy and Local History Department at the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library. From family history and house research to river history, African American history, rare special collections, this department preserves the stories that shape Cincinnati and the region. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Stephen Headley. Well, I'd like to thank Stephen Headley from the Cincinnati Public Library for joining me today on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. As many of you know, the OGS is hosting its annual conference in 2026 in Sharonville, and we're planning a trip to the Cincinnati Public Library as part of that. So, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
The question I start kind of with all my guests, because I want to know a little bit more about you before we start having a conversation about what you do, is how did you come about being a librarian and end up at the Cincinnati Public Library?
Yeah, well, I was a history major in undergraduate college and went to Denison University, graduated with a history major and was going to become a history teacher, but that just didn't quite work out. Had an awful student teaching experience, which is comical to say the least. But so I decided to go to graduate school and had moved to Iowa City, Iowa, and literally looked through the college course book. And the thing that most appealed to me was library science. I didn't even know there was such a thing at the time. So I got my library science degree and then came back to Cincinnati to work at the Cincinnati Public Library. And I really hadn't done too much with genealogy, but I got a position in the magazine and newspaper department. It's not there anymore, but we used to have a magazine and newspaper department. And we spent a lot of time looking for death notices and obituaries for people. So that was my kind of first introduction to genealogy, and I've really enjoyed it ever since. I've not had to do a great amount of my own personal genealogy because I was very fortunate in that family members had done that previously. So I was fortunate in that way. But it is very, very rewarding to be able to help people out with their genealogical research on a daily basis.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the Cincinnati Public Library in general. How long has it been around? What's been its kind of role in the community?
Yeah, sure. We've been around since 1853, so we've been here quite a long time. And historically, we've focused on genealogical materials and collecting those. I think it was around 2010 or so. We were in the top 10 from Family Tree magazine for genealogical research in public libraries. So we've always been very proud of that and have done a lot to collect genealogical materials. So yeah, we've been here a long time and have always focused on that to a certain extent and have a really wide variety of resources, both print and also now digital. So we do help a lot of people here locally, but also people from all over the country and really internationally. We've had people contact us, whether it's for people who were here in Cincinnati or really just to help people out because we've gotten a pretty good reputation for genealogical research service.
How long has the actual kind of department that you work in been around?
Yeah, we've had a lot of different changes. I work at the main library of Cincinnati's public library system. We do have 40 different branches, so we are a very large system.
Sure.
But the main library has been around for a long time, and we have changed departments, changed structure a number of different times, even since I've been working here. And I've been working at the library since 1995, so coming up on 30 years here.
Mhm.
Um, and so our department has been around in its current iteration for I think about 10 or 10 or 12 years or so. But there's going back even before that, we had when this main library building opened in 1955, we had a number of different departments, and one of them was a history department, and that's where
Mhm.
the genealogical resources were located. And then it later became the history and genealogy department in I think, the early 2000s. So we even put a uh, higher emphasis on that genealogical aspect of the department.
Talk to me a little bit. Is the genealogical focus of the library very specific to Cincinnati and Hamilton County, or is it a more broader kind of purview?
Yeah, it is really very broad.
Okay.
Certainly, we have a lot of materials for the greater Cincinnati area here, some specific just to our library, but we do strive to collect genealogical resources throughout the entire country and even internationally. Here in Cincinnati, we have a very strong German heritage. A lot
Mhm.
of German immigrants came to Cincinnati in the 19th century. So we have concentrated on some German genealogical resources. But yeah, we do cover the whole country, and like I said, even internationally. So it's a broad range.
I know my ancestors or a branch of my family was from the Cincinnati Hamilton County area, but I know that they traveled frequently back and forth between Kentucky and Cincinnati. Does the library handle any kind of resources that would shed light on those lives?
Yeah, sure. We do have a connection with the Kentucky area as well. The Kenton County Public Library in Covington, just across the river from us, also has a very strong collection. So oftentimes we'll refer people to them. But no, we certainly do cover the whole greater Cincinnati area, and things like newspapers. Cincinnati newspapers, even going back into the 19th century, they would cover those areas as
Hmm.
well. So we have a really vast historical newspaper collection. So we can often find information on people from northern Kentucky as well as Cincinnati.
You mentioned your newspaper collection. Give me kind of a broad overview of some of the resources or the most significant resources that your department has for folks doing their family histories.
Yeah, we have first of all, as I mentioned before, we've historically collected a lot of print genealogical resources. So we have a lot of those types of things, indexes for
Mm.
all around the country, marriages, deaths, those types of things, cemeteries. Um, but we do, since you mentioned newspapers, we do have a good collection of Cincinnati newspapers, and we've got access to those digitized historical newspapers. So, we
Mhm.
have the major ones are the Cincinnati Enquirer and Cincinnati Post, which is unfortunately not in business anymore, but we have digitized databases for those. And then we've been partnering with Newspaper Archive to
Okay.
digitize the remainder or a lot of other Cincinnati newspapers that we have. So through that database, or that platform, we have over 100 different Cincinnati newspaper titles available there. So, I personally use the newspaper databases heavily when doing
Mhm.
genealogical research, because I love finding stories about the
Sure.
people. Not, when doing genealogical research, I think the most gratifying thing is not only finding names, date, places, but also those stories about people. And it's pretty comical sometimes what you can find about people's ancestors, because those newspapers would print any kind of story.
Yeah, I know in one of my ancestors who lived in Kentucky and worked in Cincinnati on a daily basis and would cross over a railroad bridge every day to get to work. He ended up getting struck by a train, which made the newspaper, which was quite pleasant to find.
Yeah, yeah. You could fall off a ladder some days, and it would be in the paper. So,
Right. Yeah.
it's
No, no,
very interesting what you can find in the newspapers.
no idea of privacy in that period.
Exactly.
I was browsing the website for the department, and I noticed that you put a high um, uh, level of prominence on your African American resources, and I know for people researching African American genealogy can always be a challenge. Can you talk to me a little bit about the resources that the library has for those folks?
Yeah, again, we have a lot of different print resources that cover African American genealogy research, and then just locally too. We've had some issues of the historic African American newspapers digitized. So it's not a lot, unfortunately, because unfortunately a lot of the African American newspapers weren't archived.
Hmm.
But we've also had highlighted these African American Society columns, which these were weekly columns in the regular daily newspapers in Cincinnati in the late 19th century that had actually reported on the activities of the local African American community, and those were published roughly from 1883 to 1898. And what's great about those is that it not only does it give a real insight into the African American community, but it covers that kind of black hole of genealogical research when there's no 1890 census, but here these African American society columns cover that area. So you can
Right.
find a wealth of information about individuals or organizations or churches in the African American community through those columns. So we've digitized some of them. We continue to index them and have some printed indexes, which we've actually digitized as well.
Okay.
So that's really on a local standpoint, that's very interesting for us and has provided some good insight and good research.
Hi, everyone. Noel Poirier here, Executive Director of the Ohio Genealogical Society and your host for the Ohio Roots podcast. Did you know you can help preserve the past and empower the future? Your donation to the Ohio Genealogical Society helps protect vital family history records and supports research for generations to come. Visit www.ogs.org/donate and give today. Thank you so much for your support. If you enjoy listening to the Ohio Roots podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could go to whatever platform it is that you listen and give us a good review. Reviews help us get more listeners and reach more people with Ohio Roots and what we're trying to do with the Ohio Genealogical Society. So please leave us a nice review, and thanks for listening. Get ready for the 2025 OGS Annual Conference coming to Sharonville, Ohio, April 29th through May 2nd, 2026. Join genealogists and family historians from across the country for 4 days of inspiring sessions, expert speakers, research tools, and community connections. Don't miss your chance to discover new stories and strengthen your family history skills. Registration opens November 28th, so be sure to register and be part of Ohio's premier genealogy event. One of the other areas that I've always been very interested in is the idea of house histories, and I noticed on the website you have you have kind of a prominent link there for your house histories. Talk to me a little bit about that project.
Yeah, absolutely. We do house history or building histories on really not quite a daily basis, but just about. We have a lot of people that are interested, especially in downtown properties. They buy an old house or a business and wants to refurbish an old building, and they want to know, who lived there or what its purpose was before. So we do that on a pretty frequent basis, and that's always rewarding. Sometimes there's some limitations to it, and we find we often dispel a lot of rumors or tales about particular houses or particular families. But we use our historic Cincinnati City directories
Mhm.
mainly for that. And what's nice about that is we've digitized those from the earliest Cincinnati City directory from
Okay.
1819, and we've got them digitized up through 1955 now. So,
Okay.
we use those a lot to find addresses, people who lived at particular properties, and people can do that from the comfort of their home now too.
Okay.
So since we've digitized those resources, and I just want to I'll kind of touch on our digital services division
Yeah.
here, because we are very fortunate that we have our own digital services staff. So we do our own digitizing,
Okay.
which will digitize not only our own materials for our use, but
Mhm.
we go out to the community, and if there are organizations who want things digitized. Obviously, in these days, it's very hard to find grants to get the money to
Mhm.
do that.
Yeah.
So we'll do it for them. And we have a great deal. We'll digitize their materials free, so long as they let us post that information on our
Right.
digital library.
Okay.
And it's pretty bunch of win-win. So,
All right.
uh, so
Talk to
we
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've talked about digitization a lot, and you mentioned your partnership with Newspaper Archive for the newspapers. Talk to me a little bit about access for folks to those digital resources. Is that something? And you can talk more detail. I'll just ask: is it something that has to be done physically at the library? And you mentioned sitting at home, you can access some of them. What are the resources that are available to folks if they can't make it to the library?
Yeah, contractually, most of those databases have to be, you have to have one of our library cards to access
Hmm.
those.
Sure.
That's just the way that works. Our digital library, however, where we have those directories digitized, and anything else on our digital library is
Hmm.
available free to anybody. So you
Okay.
can access all those resources from home without having one of our library cards. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times when people Google, a particular person or place or something like that, our digital library will come up as some of the top results. So
Okay.
oftentimes that's how they come in contact with us.
Okay.
But yeah, so a lot can be done with having our library card. Um, the one database, again, contractually, where someone has to be in an actual agency of ours, one of our branches
Sure.
or our main library is using the Ancestry
Right.
Library Edition
Right.
database, which
Sure.
again is kind of something that we use on a daily basis. It's our kind of go-to database, at least to start off with. And so that does have to be used in one of our
Okay.
locations.
If I come to the library as a physical researcher, can you explain to me or describe what I'm going to experience in the library itself?
Yeah, so if you come to our main library, and I'll speak to that just because that's where I work and that's where
Hmm.
most of our resources are.
Sure.
You're going to find, first of all, we have two large buildings that comprise our main library. The north building is a relatively newer building that was built in 1997. Has a lot of our more technological areas. So we have a maker space. We have some cooperative working areas there, some study pods, that type of thing,
Hmm.
as well as the bulk of our public access computer terminals. And then the south building, which encompasses part of the oldest part of our main library, is more of a kind of a uh, regular. I don't want to use that, but a regular library full of books,
Sure. Sure.
and not as much as the technological. But we do still have some computer public
Hmm.
access terminals there. But
Yeah.
um, we have our nonfiction and fiction collections in the South Building, and it's been wonderfully remodeled. We just
Hmm.
celebrated a year anniversary last
Right. Right.
July about the refurbishing of our South Building. So
Hmm.
it's got a nice open area, atrium in the middle of it, a wonderful children's area and teen area, and then a very large nonfiction collection with open shelving. So, and then we're on the second floor
Okay.
of that part of the building. So
Yeah.
it's a very large facility, but it serves a lot of purposes for our patrons.
When I come to your department, are there specific people there you'd interact with and would be able to help you as you're kind of guiding yourself through the process?
Yeah, any one of our staff can help people who who just kind of walk in and have questions. Obviously, we have some staff that are more familiar with different subjects or different
Mhm.
areas than others, but generally anybody who walks in can get the same kind of service and help
Right.
that they can get.
You mentioned some ongoing projects that you're doing kind of all the time. Are there any special projects kind of in the future particularly for your department?
Yeah, one thing that we're really excited about is that a couple of years ago we acquired the Cincinnati Enquirer's photo archive.
Okay.
They were, it's the major city newspaper, and they were moving locations, and they had this huge photo archive that they didn't want to take with them to their new
Hmm.
location. So we acquired that, and we've been steadily digitizing images from that vast collection. So that's provided people with a lot of nice historical images of various places in Cincinnati. It does have some limitations in the dates that it covers. It's roughly 1945 to 1995, so
Okay.
you won't get, you know, really old images, but it does provide a lot of nice images for people. And then we had a couple of years ago started our yearbook digitizing
Okay.
project, where we have a very large collection of Greater Cincinnati high school and college yearbooks. And we went about digitizing as many of those as we could, and I think we were, started off with about 700 of those, and then
Hmm.
we've continually added to that. And those yearbooks are really a great source of genealogical information
Sure.
because people love seeing their ancestors in their high school days or college days. Um, so that's been something that's very beneficial. And then yet another project that we had digitized the children's home, the Cincinnati Children's Home Records. That's
Okay.
orphanage, a historic orphanage in Cincinnati. And oftentimes people, when they come across a relative that's been adopted or been placed in
Right.
a home, that's usually just a big brick wall for people.
Yeah.
And here we've digitized a lot of their records that have provided some really kind of very interesting stories when people have been looking for years and years, and then they came across these records that they didn't have access to before. So
Hmm.
we're also currently in the process of digitizing records from another orphanage here in Cincinnati, the St. Aloysius Orphanage. So
Okay.
we look forward to giving people access to those records shortly.
Yeah, it sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah, yeah, we've
I
got a
mean,
lot going on.
does your department specifically give specific programs to the public, or do people doing research, or do you partner with other organizations to offer that kind of programming?
Yeah, we do a little bit of both. So oftentimes people organizations may reach out to us to have someone come and speak for their organization. We're certainly happy to do that. But we do have our own in-house programming. We do kind of regular introduction to genealogy, and also go out to different branches and have our house history program. And then we were very happy this last October, for the first time since the pandemic times, we had our
Hmm.
genealogy lock-in, which is a very
Okay.
popular
Yeah.
program. So we had about 70
Wow.
genealogists come to our library after hours on a Saturday night, nothing better to do on a Saturday night, and really enjoy themselves having that kind of unfettered access to our department, just them. And it's not only good for gaining access to our research materials, but it's also just a nice social time too for people to connect with each other and discuss what they're researching.
Well, as someone who's worked in the field for as long as you have, is there a tip that you would give to somebody who just walks in the door starting their genealogical research for the first time?
Yeah, what we always tell people is, start with what you have at home. Start with your family. Start with those relatives and maybe older. Get all the information about your ancestors that you can from them, and that way, when you come to our facility, you'll have a list of names, hopefully, and dates and other kind of information. So when you do start looking through those genealogical databases or other resources, you already have an idea of, what's right and what's wrong. But with that, I do always tell people too that genealogy is more an art than a science. So you may think that a census record is definitive, but by all means, it is not. So if you get, someone, you see an ancestor or you see a name and, it's a couple of years off the birth date and you think, oh, well, that can't be the person, think again, because there's quite a lot of errors and inaccuracies in genealogical records. So always just keep an open mind to that.
If I want to plan a trip to the Cincinnati Public Library and specifically to your department at the main, at the main library, where would I go to find the information on how to do that?
Yeah, we should have some on our public site. There's a place where you can just ask a librarian a question, and you can always plug in your question there. We also have, you can always email our department, and the email for our department is fairly simple. It's the word research and then at chpl.org, and you could email us directly. And any one of those ways, you can contact us directly. And by all means, you could even just stop in unannounced, and that's fine too. So
that's great.
We're always ready to take on whatever questions come to us.
Well, Stephen Headley from the Cincinnati Public Library, thank you so much for joining me today on the OGS Ohio Roots podcast to talk about the library and particularly the local history and genealogy department. I know our members who are going to be traveling to the conference next year are really looking forward to paying it a visit. So thanks for being here today, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I've enjoyed it.
My thanks to Stephen Headley of the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library's Genealogy and Local History Department for sharing his insight into the genealogy resources available there. If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, we would encourage you to visit the library's website at chpl.org. And as always, thank you for listening to the OGS Ohio Roots podcast.
The Ohio Roots podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Genealogical Society, the premier gateway for discovering your Ohio family history. Hosted by OGS Executive Director Noel Poyer and edited by Luke Poyer. Theme song is Beautiful Ohio, recorded by Bob Stanley and his orchestra in 1944. To learn more about joining the Ohio Genealogical Society, visit www.ogs.org.